Chapter 5. What knowledge is most worth knowing? What should be taught in the schools? The answer to these questions take the form of curricula, and they are often a source of tension among teachers, school boards, education professors, textbook publishers, policymakers, and parents. Currently, these groups are seeking to raise academic standards through common curricular emphasis while also accommodating various cultural and ethnic groups' demands for representation in the curriculum. Baseball, debating, reading, and biology are all learned in school, along with love and tolerance, independence and frustration, mathematics and dramatics, values and ceramics, woodshop and poise, history and boredom, and computer science and leadership. Some are learned intentionally and others incidentally. We define the curriculum as all organized and intended experiences of the student for which the school accepts responsibility. In other words, the curriculum is not just the intellectual content of the subjects taught, but also the methods used to teach them. The interactions that occur among people in the school-sponsored activities that contribute to the life experience. Educational theorists have identified different kinds of curricula, including formal, extra, and hidden curricula. Let's briefly examine these different kinds of curricula. The planned content and objectives of language arts, mathematics, science, and all other subject areas available to students constitute the formal or explicit curriculum. The states and the local school boards are responsible for determining the subjects that will be taught in this formal curriculum. Later in this chapter, we will examine the formal curriculum of the schools, including trends and controversies in each of the major content areas. What students learn in the environment of the school extends beyond the planned curriculum of courses or subjects they will take, or the extracurricular activities in which they participate. That is, schools also teach a hidden or informal curriculum through which the classroom and school, as learning environments, socialize children to the values that are acceptable to the institution and society at large. The message of the hidden curriculum are usually conveyed indirectly and deal with attitudes, values, beliefs, and behavior. These messages can either support or undermine the formal curriculum when the hidden and formal curricula conflict. Many observers believe that hidden curriculum carries more weight. What are these attitudes and values, and how are they communicated to students? A major purpose of the hidden curriculum in schools has been to teach students the routines and values for getting along in school and in the larger society. Thus, it tends to have a conservative bent, focusing on preserving the status quo. In the eyes of some critics, the hidden curriculum of the schools works against diversity, equity, and social justice. One researcher suggests that schools value several specific ways of thinking and behaving. For example, schools emphasize complaint behavior as opposed to personal initiative. Students soon learn to give the teacher what she or he wants to or expects. Reward systems used by schools to teach students to read, both the students in the system to determining just what is expected to get the grade, the teacher's attention, or the sticker with the smiling face. Similarly, competitiveness is learned through the examples of athletics, grading systems that compare students to one another, and the ability grouping to separate students into classes according to their achievement. The many ways in which students learn what a school values include how the school allocates time to subjects of study, the rules established for the school, and even the architecture and furnishings of the school. As a future teacher, you should be able to identify which rules of behavior, rituals and ceremonies, and accepted patterns of teacher and student interaction are communicated to students at schools you visit. Does the climate of the classroom and the school suggest warmth, support for diversity, and nurturing of individuals or students? Or does it convey a mood of disinterest, regimentation, and apathy among staff and students? Most important, what is the school's deeper message about the stance its students should take towards the current society? In this chapter, we examine the formal curriculum, those subjects that are taught in schools, and some of the forces and instructional approaches that influence how they are taught. The typical school curriculum is a subject matter curriculum, organized according to subject matter divisions, and most of the efforts that go into curriculum development are still concentrated around traditional subject matter. In Chapter 2, What is the School and What is it For?, we discussed how the current curriculum is a social bet on which knowledge, skills, and attitudes the older generation thinks the young need to know to prosper, personally and economically, in the 21st century. There is by no means a consensus among the parties involved in placing this social bet. In fact, curriculum decision-making can resemble a battlefield in which conservatives and liberals, religious groups and agnostics, white and people of color, and many other groups grapple to ensure that their beliefs and perspectives are represented in the school's curriculum. These curriculum battles at both state and local levels can be heated because those engaged believe there is a lot at stake, in essence, the future of the United States. The strongest influence on a subject matter curriculum over the last decade has been the standards-based reform movement, which is designed to promote academic excellence and equity. Content standards are statements of the subject-specific knowledge and skills that schools are expected to teach and that students are expected to learn. In contrast to many other countries, the United States has traditionally had a decentralized system of state and local curriculum. The national government has had little influence on what is taught in the nation's schools. During the 80s and 90s, however, spurred by concern about the U.S.'s ability to compete with other countries in economic terms, a strong movement emerged toward national curriculum standards, national testing and assessment, and the establishment of national goals. A 1994 law, the Goals 2000 Educate America Act, confided 8 national goals to guide future educational initiatives and funded different academic groups to develop national standards in the various subject matter fields. The National Council of Teachers of Mathematics led the way in 1989 by publishing its mathematics standards a decade later. Most subject-specific teacher organizations had followed suit. By 1996, these centralization efforts had lost steam, giving way to a growing consensus that the setting of standards and curriculum should remain the prerogative of individual states. Interestingly, many states continued to use the national standards developed by different academic groups in formulating their own state standards. By the beginning of the 21st century, every state had developed its own standards for student learning, and most states backed up their new standards with accountability measures for both students and educators. The National No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 promoted accountability measures even more strongly, requiring states to administer annual statewide assessments in reading and mathematics to all students in grades 3 to 8. For more on this law, see Chapter 11, How Are Schools Governed, Influence, and Finance, and Chapter 12, How Should Education Be Reformed? The standards movement was immediately surrounded by controversy. Some critics objected to the attention and money lavished on the development and assessment of standards instead of other pressing educational needs, such as habitable school buildings. Other critics were concerned with the testing that accompanied the state standards. Many state legislators linked student passage of standard test with high-stakes outcomes, including graduation from high school or school accreditation. Some legislators made educators accountable for students learning the standards and passing the assessment tests. Teachers' jobs and students' future education were suddenly at risk if students failed the test, and educators and students alike felt much more pressure to succeed. In spite of these criticisms, numerous polls show that the public overwhelmingly supports the idea of high standards. In Chapter 12, How Should Education Be Reformed?, discusses the current status of national education standards and assessment in more detail. In 2010, led by the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers, a set of Common Core standards was developed in English language arts and mathematics. The Common Core state standards define the knowledge and skills students should have within their K-12 education careers so that they graduate high school able to succeed in entry-level credit-bearing academic college courses and in workforce training programs. These standards addressed a weakness of the system of individual state standards, that is, the difficulty level of the standards and the test used to assess them varied greatly. As a result, some states had high standards with lower pass rates, while other states had lower standards with higher pass rates. Many people believed that what students should learn in English, language arts, and mathematics shouldn't differ depending on the state they live in. As a result, these Common Core state standards were developed, and as of May 2014, 44 states and the District of Columbia had voluntarily adopted the standards. Most of these states also agreed to implement the tests that are being developed to assess the standards. However, more recently, policymakers in a number of these states are having second thoughts, as some opponents to the core curriculum and its assessment have challenged the plans for implementation. The first states to assess students using the new standards and tests have discovered that the failure rate has increased dramatically. In Kentucky and New York, for example, student scores fell dramatically as teachers and students struggled to teach and learn the higher standards and succeed with the more rigorous tests. Whether or not the majority of states who have signed on to the Common Core standards will stay the course remains to be seen. In looking at the courses of study prescribed by the 50 states, we will see that their similarities far outweigh their differences. Parts of this chapter discuss some reasons for this phenomenon, such as the influence of standard-based reform movements in the various states and the uniformity of available textbooks. For now, we examine what is presently taught in elementary and secondary schools across the country. At both levels, the curriculum is organized into subject matter areas, which ordinarily are English language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies, foreign languages, the arts, physical education, and health electives, and career and technical education. Most of the national organizations representing teachers of these various subjects areas have developed content standards describing what elementary and secondary students should know and be able to do in each content area. The websites for these organizations and their respective content standards can be found in the For Further Information section at the end of the chapter. The Language Arts program seeks to develop in children the skills of reading, writing, speaking, and listening, as well as a knowledge of curricular as represented in literature. The importance of language arts cannot be overemphasized because no subject can be successfully studied without adequate language skills. In elementary schools, most language arts programs focus on helping students develop written and oral communication skills, comprehension and problem-solving strategies, creativity, and appreciation for language and literature. At the secondary level, English courses focus on integration of the language arts using literature as the prime motivator. Teachers today are selecting literature that is relevant to student interests, yet representative of an accepted literary tradition, balancing classic literature selections with works by and about minority groups, instructing students in critical thinking, encouraging writing across the curriculum, integrating the various language arts by, for example, linking reading and writing together, or speaking, listening, and reading, composing and creating in new media forms such as video or online presentations, and maintaining a balance between composition and literature in the curriculum. Many English educators are chafing under the pressure to prepare students for the Common Core state standards, rigorous assessments that address topics in literature different from what they had been previously teaching. Adjusting the curriculum and use of standards for children from multiple language and cultural backgrounds constitutes a major challenge for language arts and English teachers. Major disagreements exist in the field of reading education. The basic debate is whether reading instruction should emphasize the integration of language arts skills and knowledge in a literature-based approach, commonly known as the whole language approach, or whether it should focus on phonics instruction, an approach to reading that teaches the reader to decode words by sounding out letters and combinations of letters. The whole language approach to reading stresses that children should use language in ways that relate to their own lives and culture. Advocates of this approach tolerate the use of invented spelling by children because it is seen as part of a child's reading development and because it is feared that correcting a child's early spelling error will discourage the child from enjoying writing. Whole language teaching uses such common techniques as daily journal and letter writing, a great deal of silent and oral reading for literature, and student cooperation. During the 1970s and 80s, whole language approaches to reading displaced the phonics approach in many schools. Eventually, discontent with declining reading scores in states that emphasized a whole language approach spurred a renewed interest in phonics. In fact, the issue has become politically charged, with many conservatives supporting phonics and many liberals supporting whole language approaches. Although both the whole language and phonics camps have their strong believers, recent research concludes that it is important to teach explicit, systematic phonics within a context of meaningful literature. Phonemic awareness, the understanding that sounds make up language, seems to be crucial in the development of good readers. Thus, a balanced use of both approaches rather than abandonment of one approach in favor of the other seems to be the key to reading instruction. Many major publishers are now including both approaches in their reading series. The use of technology and video games to teach reading and increase motivation has also entered the reading literacy debate. The trick is to balance computer time and human interaction. Recent research shows that teaching children to read through educational sites like Reading Eggs can help improve U.S. literacy skills. Before the 1950s, schools emphasized student mastery of basic computational skills. In the 60s, a new type of mathematics curriculum, known as the New Math, emerged. It saw mathematics as a language that both communicates ideas about numbers and describes the quantitative aspects of ideas and objects. As a result, the New Math stresses structure rather than drill and computational skills. The New Math tended to be abstract, and for the average student, its conceptual theories were of little practical use. Today, the traditional approach, featuring drill and practice, computation, and memorization, tends to be used in courses for non-college bound students. College-bound students, after studying algebra and geometry, often take optional fourth-year courses that place a strong emphasis on structure, learning by discovery, definitions, properties, sets, rigor, statistics, calculus, trigonometry, and other abstract concepts. A major educational debate focuses on whether children should be explicitly taught skills based on formulas or algorithms versus an inquiry approach in which students address real-world problems to develop fluency in number sense, reasoning, and problem-solving skills. In this latter approach, conceptual understanding is a primary goal, and algorithmic competence follows secondarily. Mathematics at the elementary level emphasizes the use of hands-on manipulatives to aid students in learning about patterns in mathematics and the base 10 system. Mathematical reasoning and problem solving are emphasized. Experts in mathematics education are urging teachers to introduce multiple approaches for solving real-world problems. These emphases are consistent with the popular constructivist approach to learning, which is based on psychological theories suggesting that people must construct knowledge and meaning for themselves, rather than receiving knowledge passively from teachers or textbooks. Teachers are being urged to focus on conceptual mathematics understanding before introducing procedural rules. This ordering reflects the growing body of research that suggests if students learn procedural rules before they learn mathematical concepts, they will score significantly lower than do students who learn concepts first. Calculators and computers have become common in the classroom, even at the elementary level, as mathematics education focuses less on computational skills and more on developing concepts, relationships, structures, and problem-solving skills. Moreover, the use of computers and computer programming in mathematics classes enhances the practical utility of mathematics instruction for many students. Not only do computers create interest in the curriculum, but students also receive valuable experience that may prove useful as they seek jobs, as described in Chapter 7. What should teachers know about technology and its impact on schools? Graphing calculators are seen as important tools to help students understand complex mathematical relationships. In addition to using technology and emphasizing problem-solving mathematics, problems have been moving away from the traditional compartmentalization of arithmetic, algebra, geometry, calculus, and so on, as new topics such as probability, statistics, and computer science are emphasized. Course designers have begun to integrate a variety of mathematics skills and topics in one course or across several courses. The blending of mathematics with other subject areas, including consumer economics and personal finance, will continue as part of the trend towards broadening students' application of their mathematical understanding and skills. Because of the relatively poor showing in mathematics assessments in the U.S. compared to many other nations, the CCSS board urges that the mathematics curriculum be more focused and coherent. The U.S. mathematics and science curricula have been criticized as being a mile wide and an inch deep. The new CCSS purport to be a step in making mathematics more like the mathematics taught in other high-performing countries. Science in the elementary grades takes advantage of children's natural curiosity about the world around them: plants, seasons, color, light, sound, and animals. In the upper elementary and middle school grades, the curriculum expands to include weather and climate, the solar system, electricity, and health-related topics. The secondary school science curriculum is still centered on year-long courses: general science, biology, chemistry, and physics, despite the efforts of some science educators to foster an integrated approach in which each of these science subjects is taught each year. Two major questions drive science education reform. Where will the next generation of scientists come from, and how can all students be prepared to make informed judgments about such critical and science-based issues as environmental pollution, energy sources, and biotechnology? For reformers, there have been both good and bad news concerning science education in the United States. The bad news is that American youth do not know much science. The good news is that the country is reaching consensus about how to remedy the problem. In 2013, a new set of science standards called the Next Generation Science Standards was published in an attempt to identify what science K-12 students should know. Concern that American students lag behind the science performance of students in other countries was a major impetus for the development of these standards. Developed by a coalition of science organizations, scientists, in 26 states, the standards are rich in content and practice and arranged in a coherent manner across disciplines and grades. They are intended to overcome widespread scientific ignorance, to standardize teaching among states, and to raise the number of high school graduates who choose scientific and technical majors in college. It is still too early in the process to evaluate the standards' effectiveness, but those connected with the development of the standards are hopeful that when the standards are implemented, the students will receive a science education comparable to that by students in the high-performing countries. The next steps will be for individual states to consider adopting the standards and developing curricula and instructional practice to incorporate the standards. Social studies, the study of people and their ideas, action, and relationships, is TX, a discipline in the same sense as mathematics or physics, although it draws on the various social sciences disciplines, as well as on religion, literature, and the arts for its content and methods of inquiry. History has traditionally been the leading discipline of social studies at both the elementary and secondary levels. Although other disciplines have made some inroads in recent years, history remains the dominant focus in these schools. Recently, efforts have been made to restore geography to the social studies curriculum, following assessments that pointed out students' inability to locate countries on maps. Government is also a staple of the social studies curriculum. Ultimately, the social studies curriculum at both the elementary and secondary levels encompasses a hodgepodge of approaches. In many elementary schools in particular, social studies has been neglected in favor of efforts to meet the reading and mathematics testing requirements set out by the No Child Left Behind legislation. A major debate is raging over whether the social studies curriculum emphasizes European history and culture at the expense of Asian, African, and Latin American history and culture. We discuss this issue later in the chapter. Civic learning or civic education is another issue gaining the attention of social study educators. Advocates for this new focus call for courses that will acquaint racially and culturally diverse student population with the heritage common to the American democratic tradition. These new courses would extend the basic study of American law and government to include trends in history, issues in contemporary society, and questions of character and values. Through critical study of case histories and current news reports, students will learn to apply principles of democracy to the everyday concerns they will face as citizens. Practical experiences in civic, cultural, and volunteer activities are also strongly recommended. The new civics course may help unify educators who currently favor many different approaches to the teaching of social studies, including issues-centered traditional, historical, critical thought, and character education approaches. In 2013, the National Council for the Social Studies released Social Studies State Standards, College, Career, and Civic Life Framework for Social Studies State Standards, which are designed to align with the CCSS and English Language Arts. These new state standards offer guidance to states in formulating their standards in social studies and relate to the 2010 set of content standards issued by NCSS. These latter standards articulate a framework that seeks to foster academic and civil competence by integrating the national standards across various social sciences. 10 themes are highlighted in the framework: culture, people, places and environments, individual, groups, and institutions, production, distribution, and consumption, global connections, time, continuity, and change, individual development and identity, power, authority, and governance, science, technology, and society, and civic ideals and practices. Compared with citizens in other nations, Americans are woefully unprepared to speak foreign languages. Approximately 44% of all students in U.S. public high schools are enrolled in a foreign language course, with Spanish and French being the most popular languages taken. On the bright side, more elementary schools are offering foreign language programs in recognition of the ease with which young children learn foreign languages. Foreign language departments in the public schools are trying to make the study of foreign languages more attractive by expanding their course offerings and integrating language study with concerns for international and multicultural education. Leaders in the field emphasize the cultural foundations of language, asserting that language study increases linguistic competence and cultural sensitivity. CD-ROMs and the internet can assist students and teachers in gaining access to current materials from other countries and interacting with key pals from other countries, thereby facilitating teaching and learning. Early introduction of foreign languages continues to gain support, and concern about U.S. competitiveness in a global economy has led many business leaders and politicians to urge greater emphasis on foreign language instruction. For example, schools are seeing increased demand for instruction in Arabic and Chinese owing to U.S. involvement in the Middle East and the emergence of new trade opportunities in China. Techniques used in elementary bilingual education are immersion, partial immersion, and the foreign languages in the elementary school program have focused instruction on developing fluency in speaking, writing, and comprehension. Proficiency-oriented instruction which focuses on what learners can do with the language, marks modern-day language teaching. The arts include visual arts, music, dance, and theater. Art and music in elementary schools are ordinarily taught by regular classroom teachers, although some schools hire specialist teachers in one or both areas. Dance and theater are largely ignored in elementary schools, despite the fact that children of this age are less inhibited and seem to enjoy these activities more than do secondary school students. The small amount of instruction provided in the arts for elementary students contrasts with high school offerings such as drama clubs, orchestras, bands, and dance groups. In most instances, instruction in music or dance during a child's elementary school years takes the form of private instruction outside the public school. Programs in the arts have traditionally tended to emphasize the creation of an art project or the development of a performance. More recently, newer programs have emphasized aesthetic education and art as a way of knowing and perceiving the world. Curriculum specialists have suggested integrating the arts with other subject matter to show the usefulness of the arts and to appeal to a broader range of intelligences. There is little doubt that the arts play a crucial role in the development of cultured, educated people, and that they respond to a deep instinct in humanity. Even so, the arts remain an endangered species, subject to extinction whenever budget cuts occur and when high-stakes assessments of standards in language arts, mathematics, and science dictate what teachers emphasize in their classrooms. Physical education, by and through human movement, contributes to physical fitness, skill, and knowledge and development, and social and psychological development. Currently, physical education curricula are designed to respond to four needs: the need to develop aerobic capacity to maintain acceptable cardiorespiratory efficiency, the need to achieve appropriate levels of body fat, the need to acquire strength to perform expected tasks of living, and the need to achieve flexibility and abdominal strength to avoid lower back injuries. To address these needs, sports skills are alternated with fitness development through such activities as swimming, jogging, bicycling, yoga, and cross-country skiing. Students are given information on exercise and nutrition so they can understand how to balance caloric intake and maintain an appropriate body fat level. Physical education teachers are typically licensed for both elementary and secondary school teaching, but teachers usually seek out the age levels in which they are most interested. Physical education teachers are also trained to adapt activities for children with disabilities. The health curriculum addresses such topics as injury prevention and safety, prevention and control of disease, substance abuse, nutrition, family life, consumer health, and mental and emotional health. More than most academic subjects, health education strives to change students' attitudes and behaviors to get them to take fewer risks and use more preventative measures. Concerns over childhood obesity have focused renewed attention on the school's role in helping prevent obesity. In spite of this recent attention, many health educators express frustration that health is not identified as a critical component of the K-12 curriculum, and that questions about health do not appear on high-stakes tests. Because health is not tested, it is not stressed in schools as much as health educators would like. Most high schools today offer their students a number of options regarding the courses they take. However, the average high school student graduates with about 20 units. Large high schools may offer as many as 100 courses. The average student then will probably choose among optional courses according to the individual interests or academic or career ambitions. Examples of elective courses might include personal finance, art history, introduction to computers and appliances, psychology, and anthropology. Although college preparation has been the major goal of many high schools, efforts have increased recently to provide comprehensive programs for students not planning to attend college. This trend is especially evident in rural areas where small local high schools have often been replaced by comprehensive regional high schools. Some of the courses involved, such as technology education, distributive education, home economics, business education, and agriculture, are specifically vocational. Others, such as driver ed and consumer ed, have been added to the curriculum because of an obvious societal need or in response to student interests. A disturbing trend for those who teach elective courses in the increase in requirements for graduation from high schools, which leaves less time for elective courses. Some argue that a common general education provides the best foundation for future work or academic study. Others hope to maintain a large percentage of the curriculum as electives. These issues, when raised by teachers of elective courses, focuses attention on the purpose of comprehensive schooling and on definitions of what is basic. The purpose of career and technical education is to provide a foundation of skills that allow high school students to be gainfully employed after graduation. The subject areas most commonly associated with career and technical education are business, trade and industrial education, health occupations, agriculture, family and consumer sciences, marketing, and technology. In recent decades, career and technical education has come under fire from those who noted its inadequacy in preparing students for careers in high technology fields or in the country's now dominant service economy. Reformers urge teachers to help students see the relationships between the topics that they study and their applications in real-world contexts between the topics and their applications in real-world context to emphasize real-life problem solving. Many school-to-work programs designed to help students develop skills and understandings that will prepare them to adapt to the changing needs of the workplace have been developed. Such programs take many different forms, ranging from career academies that feature specialized career-oriented curricula in such areas as health professions, business, or law, to paid internships and co-op experiences. School work with local businesses to design courses and experiences that will prepare high school students for particular kinds of jobs that meet local business needs. Hundreds of thousands of businesses nationwide now participate in school-to-work partnerships. The emphasis on high-stakes academic assessments has contributed to a decline in the number of students who are enrolled in career and technical education, with 7.6 million secondary students in 2007 to 2008, a drop of 7% from the previous year. In spite of this decline, in fiscal year 2013, the federal government distributed $1.1 billion to the states to promote secondary and post-secondary career and technical education. Some educators and labor officials urge that the line between academic and career and technical education be blurred, and that all youngsters be provided with skills in traditionally academic subject areas, including mathematics, science, and English, as well as more applied learning experiences. Some states, such as Oregon, require all graduating high school students to have work experience and a career plan. One form of work experience is apprenticeship programming, in which students receive on-the-job training with a company for 4 days a week and participate in classroom instruction on the 5th day. Such programs are designed to help youth make an easy transition from school to work. Another promising trend is the development of tech prep programs that link high school and post-secondary study. Tech prep programs typically encompass the last 2 years of high school and the first 2 years of college. They provide an attractive alternative for students who do not plan to attend a 4-year college. Both supporters and critics of contemporary curricula often focus on the results, that is, what students actually learn from their studies of language arts, mathematics, science, and so forth. The methods of assessing results are themselves highly controversial and will be discussed further in Chapter 12, How Should Education Be Reformed? In this section, we look at the results of both national and international studies that attempt to judge the academic performance of U.S. students. Since their introduction more than 30 years ago, national assessment of educational process assessments have been conducted periodically in reading, mathematics, science, writing, history, geography, and other fields. Administered to a representative national sample of students, the NAEP assessments are the primary source of an educational achievement in the United States, and they have become known as the nation's report card. Although most of all the states access their students' progress on content standards, they do not use the same standards or the same tests. So until the CCSS in English, Language Arts, and Mathematics, discussed earlier in the chapter, become operational in most states, comparisons across states are mainly limited to the NAEP data. Assessment occurs at 3 grade levels, 4th, 8th, and 12th. Achievement levels are defined as basic, proficient, and advanced. So how are American students doing? Figure 5.1 represents recent NAEP data on student skills in mathematics, science, reading, writing, and U.S. history. 34% of 4th graders, 32% of 8th graders, and 21% of 12th graders scored at or above the proficient level in science. Over the past decade, student achievement on the NAEP mathematics test has improved significantly for all ages and all racial and ethnic groups, representing improvements of as much as 1 year's worth of mathematic knowledge since 1990 for 4th, 8th, and 12th graders. Reading scores, by contrast, have increased only slightly since 1994. The 2011 reading assessment of 4th graders indicated that 67% of the students were at or above the basic level, whereas 34% were at or above the proficient level. For 8th graders, the comparable figures were 76% and 34%. Further NAEP assessments reveal that despite improvements, U.S. students are still lacking in knowledge of history, geography, and civics. The 2010 history assessment showed a slight improvement in the basic scores for 4th and 8th graders, but not much change in the percentage of students scoring at the proficient or advanced level. 73% of the 4th graders, 69% of 8th graders, and 45% of 12th graders achieved at the basic level. By comparison, 20% of 4th graders, 17% of 8th graders, and 12% of 12th graders reached the proficient or advanced level. In the most recent geography tests, 21% of 4th graders, 27% of 8th graders, and 20% of 12th graders reached the proficient or advanced level. As these data indicate, in every subject field, a large majority of American students are failing to achieve the proficient level in the NAEP assessments. Many of those students are members of minority groups. Black, Hispanic, and Native American students continue to score significantly lower than white and Asian American students on the NAEP assessments. Although the gap between black and white students has been narrowing slightly, males continue to outperform females to a slight extent on mathematics and science tests, although girls have made gains in recent years, whereas females significantly outperform males on the reading and writing tests. Compared with the academic performances of students from other developed countries, U.S. students have tended to have average results. The Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study tested the mathematics and science knowledge of students at 3 grade levels, 4th, 8th, and 12th, in 1995, 1999, 2003, 2007, and 2011. In 2011, 4th grade students from over 50 countries and 8th grade students from over 40 countries were tested. TIMSS was the largest, most comprehensive, and most rigorous international comparison of education ever done. What were the results? In the 2011 mathematics testing, U.S. 4th graders were outscored by students from 11 countries, while they outscored students from 40 countries. The average mathematics score of U.S. 8th graders was higher than those of 37 of the 47 other countries, lower than those in 5 countries, and not measurably different from the average scores of students in the remaining 5 countries. The average U.S. 4th grade science score was higher than those in 44 of the 52 other countries, lower than those in 6 countries. The average U.S. 8th grade science score was higher than those in 34 of the 45 other countries, lower than those in 9 countries. Neither U.S. 4th nor 8th graders showed any detectable change in science achievement in 2011 compared to 2007, whereas 4th graders showed improvement in mathematics over the same period, but 8th graders did not. Drawing achievement comparisons across different countries comes with many warnings. Countries participating in the TIMSS study differ in many ways. Some have well-organized national curricula complete with standard textbooks, whereas others have decentralized systems of education. Some of the countries are rich, whereas others are poor. Some have relatively uniform ethnicities, whereas others are very diverse. With these caveats, it is clear that compared to its performances in earlier TIMSS assessments, the U.S. has made some progress. Another international standardized assessment in the Program for International Student Assessment, which is administered every 3 years to 15-year-old students and tests knowledge in mathematics, science, and reading literacy, administered in 2000, 2003, 2006, 2009, and 2012. The latest PISA assessment shows U.S. students scoring below average in mathematics and about average in reading and science literacy relative to their counterparts in other industrialized countries. A number of explanations have been proposed to explain the differences in mathematics and science achievement test scores between U.S. students and those from high-scoring countries, including cultural differences that result in greater value being placed on education in some countries than in the U.S., lower expectations for U.S. students, and more U.S. students holding jobs. Moreover, the TIMSS studies revealed that the content of U.S. mathematics and science classes is not as challenging or focused as that of other countries. Many middle school students in the United States are still doing elementary arithmetic and introductory science, while their international counterparts are studying algebra, geometry, physics, and chemistry. By the senior year of high school, many U.S. students have stopped taking math and science altogether. A large number of students never study algebra, geometry, trigonometry, chemistry, or physics. Another factor may be the way that mathematics and science are taught in U.S. schools. TIMSS researchers note that the U.S. mathematics and science curricula cover many topics but devote little time to any one topic. The U.S. is number one in the world in one category, the size of the textbooks, which tend to be encyclopedic rather than focused. U.S. teachers, supported by the textbooks they use, teach more topics but in less detail than teachers from high-scoring countries. Furthermore, compared with Japanese teachers, they focus much more on procedures and skills and much less on concepts, deductive reasoning, and understanding. Perhaps surprisingly, the U.S. teachers assign more homework and spend more class time discussing it than do teachers from Japan and Germany. National and international assessments show that by high school, students often fall behind in learning sciences and mathematics. Unfortunately, most standardized assessments don't measure actual performances, such as these students conducting a science experiment, which can foster a deep understanding of scientific concepts and methods. The total amount of time students spend on academic pursuits is likely has an effect on their performance. At the high school level, U.S. students spend much of their school day in such non-academic activities as counseling, gym, homeroom, driver training, pep rallies, and education about personal safety, AIDS, consumer affairs, and family life. An average of only 41% of secondary school time has to be devoted to core academic work to earn a high school diploma, and that's probably the way most American parents want it. Although this study is 20 years old, there is little to indicate the situation has changed dramatically either way. Both parents and students disavow a nerdish emphasis on strong academics in favor of preparing well-rounded individuals by making it difficult for schools to strengthen their academic requirements beyond a certain point. As long as the majority of Americans feel this way, it seems unlikely that we will see a radical restructuring of schools to emphasize strong academics. There are several lessons to be learned from TIMSS and PISA. First, we need to continue setting clear, high standards for what students should know and be able to do in mathematics and science. Second, we need to align everything else we do with those standards. Initial preparation of teachers, selection of texts and other curriculum materials, design of assessments, and continuing professional development of teachers. The difficulty is that, unlike most of the other countries participating in the TIMSS, the United States is highly decentralized in its educational decision-making, which makes it extremely difficult to align various educational components with the standards. Perhaps the adoption of the CCSS in English, language arts, and mathematics by so many states and the possible adoption of next-generation science standards will lead to a more unified approach to the teaching and study of these subjects. Although we can examine what is taught in the schools in terms of the subject offered, the curriculum as students experience it is affected by a number of other factors. The individual teacher, of course, is a major variable in what students actually learn. The whole book is about you as that teacher. The classroom and school context also affect the delivery of the curriculum, as does the academic track to which a student is assigned. In this section, we will focus on two other major influences on the curriculum that is actually delivered to students: textbooks and innovative instructional approaches. Education in the United States is constitutionally the domain of the various individual states. That is, the states are empowered to establish curricula and to organize and finance school systems. Unlike in many other countries, there is no national curriculum established by the federal government and implemented throughout the country. Even so, some educational observers assert that we do have a national curriculum of sorts called textbooks. Several studies have concluded that most of what teachers and students do in classrooms reflect the specific textbook used in those settings. For example, the objectives and goals for student learning are defined by the textbook. Learning activities and materials are provided to teachers as part of the textbook package, and tests geared to the textbook's objectives are usually prepared by the textbook publisher for the teacher's use. States do exert some influence on the content of textbooks, but bluntly, they cast their votes on that content through their decisions on whether to use a particular book. Critics, however, have noted the shortcomings of many adoption systems that allow too little time and too little money to support the selection of excellent texts by qualified personnel. More than 20 states have a textbook adoption process that involves reviewing textbooks according to state guidelines and then mandating either specific books that schools must use or lists of approved textbooks from which schools must choose. As part of this process, citizens have the opportunity to examine textbooks being considered for statewide adoption and to express their objections to particular books. Because textbook adoption is a multi-million-dollar business, publishing companies must be careful not to include material that influential groups and factions might find offensive and that might jeopardize their books' chances of adoption. With the implementation of content standards and the CCSS in the various states, school boards and faculty responsible for adopting textbooks now examine publishers rarely customize their books for each state. Instead, they organize the books to meet the standards of those states that have a lot of children and that buy a lot of books. Publishers relied on the similarity of standards between at least some standards in nearly every state, and the consequence standards set by large population states such as Texas, California, and Florida greatly influenced the content of textbooks produced by commercial publishers. Today, however, the content of textbooks is produced by commercial publishers. Today, however, textbook companies are more able to customize textbooks for each state. With the adoption of the CCSS in English language arts and mathematics by many states, a common set of textbooks are likely to be developed to address the standards in these two subject areas. A wave of educational reform is directing attention to the quality of the textbooks that determine the curriculum. Some critics claim that the texts are dumbed down to meet readability requirements, the writing style designed to meet arbitrary criteria for length of words and sentences can be awkward and stiff. Others believe that the textbooks try to include too much material and so lack depth of coverage, a criticism certainly supported by findings from the TIMSS. Critics also complain about typical textbook emphasis on skills development instead of stimulation of students' interest and intellect. These emphases create texts that are dry, barren of ideas, devoid of concepts, and lacking in the rigorous writing style that stirs students to comprehend and retain what they read. Many educational commentators suggest that teachers and curriculum developers rely too much on textbooks and not enough on primary sources. Because what is taught in public schools touches people's hearts and minds, the content of the textbooks arouses political passion. One such controversy arose in Texas in 2010 when the elected Texas Board of Education voted to make over 100 changes in the state's history and economic textbooks that will put a conservative stamp on the textbooks. The changes stress the superiority of American capitalism, question the founding fathers' commitment to a purely secular government, and present Republican political philosophies in a more positive light. One of the changes included downgrading the role Thomas Jefferson played in our nation's founding, apparently because his secular views conflicted with the more Christian-oriented views of a majority of the Texas Board. Conservative members of the board believed that the history textbooks being used in Texas classrooms reflected a liberal bias by promoting multiculturalism, secular values, and a negative interpretation of American history. At the expense of Christian values, the importance of free enterprise, and a belief in the exceptionality of America, the actions by the board provoked much criticism and discussion around the U.S. What is clear is that what states choose to include in their textbooks can be very controversial and influenced by political and religious perspectives. A recent modification of the traditional textbook involves the use of electronic materials. For example, the University of California, Berkeley developed the full option science system for K-8 science, which incorporates CDs and online interactive activities both at school and at home. Several states have adopted this system as an option for school districts to use in their science curriculum. The online software is available in both Spanish and English. Besides keeping information current, the technology provides access to rich materials and interesting projects, such as using interactive and video elements to engage in or observe scientific experiments that would be impractical to conduct in the classroom. The technology also provides alternative assignments by permitting students to answer questions and follow directions on the disk or online. Some people, including U.S. Secretary of Education Arne Duncan, have called for moving away from printed textbooks in favor of digital ones. The transition to digital involves much more than scanning books and uploading them to computers, tablet devices, or e-readers. Proponents describe a comprehensive shift to implement tablet devices or Proponents describe comprehensive shift to immersive online learning experiences that engage students in a way textbooks never could. Florida has already passed legislation requiring districts to spend half of their instructional material budgets on digital content by 2015-2016. Alabama is considering a bill that would use $100 million in bonds to give digital textbooks and tablets to students. California, Indiana, Utah, and Washington State have all passed legislation promoting digital education content. Whether electronic media will make major inroads in textbooks adoption on whether subjects remain to be seen, controversial textbooks, although they lack technical pizzazz and become outdated more quickly, have some distinct advantages over their electronic rivals. Books are more portable and they do not break down. One thing appears certain: textbooks, whether in paper or electronic form, are one of the major determinants of U.S. elementary and secondary school curricula, and that situation does not appear likely to change in the near future. Curriculum and instructions are intimately related, and the instructional approaches that teachers use clearly shape how students experience the curriculum. Although these approaches have remained amazingly constant since the 1890s, especially at the secondary level, some alterations to traditional teacher-centered instruction have been taken hold. Educators are constantly searching for new ways to deliver the curriculum more effectively. All of the trends discussed here can be used in a variety of subject areas with students of many age and ability levels. We will look at 6 non-traditional instructional influences on the curriculum: interdisciplinary curriculum, cooperative learning, critical thinking, and problem solving, running across the curriculum. Differentiated instruction and flipped instruction. Students, and particularly secondary students, are often critical of the traditional curriculum, which seems irrelevant to their lives outside of school. They often fail to see how English, history, math, and science relate to them. The curriculum they experience is fragmented and isolated. In one language arts class, the teacher gave the dates of a famous author's birthday and death and asked the students to figure out how old the author was when she died. Silence fell over the room as students pondered the question. Finally, one student said, "It's hard to do math in English class." Students have learned to segment and separate their knowledge into compartments because of the way we teach content. Many teachers agree. Nothing at the real world is not organized by disciplines, but contains situations and problems that occur across disciplinary boundaries. These teachers are returning to an old idea of organization and teaching the curriculum in an integrated interdisciplinary fashion. Although numerous definitions of interdisciplinary curriculum or integrated curriculum exist, both terms are often used synonymously to mean a curriculum that cuts across subject matter lines to focus on comprehensive life problems or broad-based areas of study that bring together the various segments of the curriculum in meaningful association. Many approaches to developing integrated interdisciplinary curricula are possible. One of the simplest is for 2 or more teachers to form different disciplinary backgrounds to plan and teach their respective subjects together, seeking different disciplinary perspectives on a particular unit of study. For example, an English teacher and a social studies teacher might team together to integrate the study of the 19th century by examining the history and literature of that period. Another approach is thematic in nature. In this case, a cross-departmental team chooses themes as overlays to the different subjects. Inventions, for example, is a theme that could combine science and mathematics in the study of machines and their mechanics, reading and writing about inventors in language arts, and designing and building models in industrial arts. Another example, health, would permit a number of different subjects to be addressed in an effort to better understand specific health topics. Yet another thematic approach is to identify concepts that apply in different subjects, such as examining how symmetry, patterns, evidence, and proof apply in mathematics, art, science, and social studies and language arts. Proponents of the interdisciplinary curriculum argued that its merits far outweigh an expenditure of time and effort required to implement this approach. Students benefit by experiencing coherence in the curriculum and connections to real-world situations. Critical thinking and problem-solving skills are developed within specific contexts rather than in isolation. Teachers benefit by having students who enjoy learning and by working collaboratively with other teachers. Although interdisciplinary teaching is enjoying a resurgence of popularity, particularly in middle schools, the disciplinary approach to curriculum in the secondary schools is well entrenched and is being reinforced by the development of national standards within each discipline rather than across disciplines. The tension between the disciplinary and interdisciplinary approaches to curriculum development will likely persist for some time. For more on interdisciplinary curricula, see the further information section at the end of the chapter. Cooperative learning in the classroom is another trend influencing what is taught in the schools. Those who have analyzed the hidden curriculum have observed that U.S. schools tend to reward competitive or individual accomplishment more than cooperative effort. Arguing for cooperative learning techniques, some educators maintain that such techniques can change the way schools learn, their attitudes towards what they are taught, and their perceptions of themselves and others. What is cooperative learning? It takes many different forms, but all involve students working in small groups or teams to help one another learn academic material. Cooperative learning strategies are organized, highly structured methods that usually involve formal presentation of information, student practice, and coaching in learning teams. Individual assessment of mastery and public recognition of team success. By their structure and individual assignments, cooperative learning strategies avoid the problem of letting the hard-working students in the group do all the work while the other students get a free ride. Such strategies have proven successful across grade levels and in different subjects. Although the effectiveness of cooperative learning, particularly for achievement outcomes, depends on the particular approach used, overall positive effects have been found on such diverse outcomes as self-esteem, intergroup relations, acceptance of academically slower students, attitude towards school, and ability to work cooperatively. The success of cooperative learning strategies comes from the important characteristics, group goals, individual accountability, and equal opportunity for success. Group goals usually take the form of rewards based on team success in academic tasks. To achieve team success, each member of the group must coordinate the completion of his or her assigned task with the work of the group members. Each team member is interdisciplinary. Individual accountability involves assessing each student's mastery of the content, with the results usually given back to the group and the individual. Teammates practice together and support and coach one another, but people are assessed in the usual ways. The team's success is often judged by how much each team member improves relative to their earlier assignment. Even the lowest achieving student can contribute to the team's success by improving on the first assessment. Equal opportunities for success are ensured by team scoring systems that are based on individual improvement over prior performance. This feature reinforces the perception that student effort, not just innate ability, counts. Cooperative learning has been found to be particularly effective instructional tool in teaching at-risk students who benefit from immediate feedback for their learning attempts. It works well because it offers students more involvement and control over their learning activities. Because many schools attempt to do away with tracking and to encourage heterogeneous grouping, cooperative learning provides a means to make all students feel they are essential to the classroom learning process. It enables students to recognize that all of them, when given a chance, have something to contribute to everyone's learning. Cooperative learning has quickly become a major instructional method in the United States, particularly in elementary schools. A growing interest in helping students become better thinkers and problem solvers evidenced by the multitude of publications, workshops, curriculum study institutes, journal articles, and course requirements addressing the topic of thinking and problem solving. Although many people favor teaching, definitions of critical thinking vary widely. At the heart of all these definitions, however, is the intent to help students evaluate the worth of ideas, opinions, or evidence before making a decision or judgment. Some educators favor approaches that help students detect bias or identify a wide range of propaganda strategies. The teaching of philosophy is also proposed as a way to provide criteria by which students can judge others' thinking. Still, other approaches identify component skills within the realm of critical thinking and advocate direct instruction in each skill. Socratic questioning is also suggested as a way to teach the art of thinking. Problem solving is an element of critical thinking that has attracted increased attention and seen increased use in recent decades. Problem solving generally refers to the process of either presenting students with a problem or helping identify a problem and then observing and helping them become aware of the conditions, procedures, or steps needed to solve it. The problems may range from putting puzzles together to solving simple science or mathematic problems to solving more complex mental, logical, or social dilemmas. A problem may be presented as an individual activity, such as when independently predicting outcomes in a reading passage, or may be used with a group, such as when simulating wilderness survival activities that require group cooperation. Despite the many possible ways of teaching problem solving, the emphasis in each case is on the process of reaching a solution. Proponents of problem solving instruction point out that if students become more aware of their mental processes, they will be able to exercise greater control over their own learning and thinking in future situations. In group problem solving activities, students may also benefit from interacting with one another and from being exposed to the variety of approaches used by peers in solving the same problem. What is the role of critical thought in the curriculum? At one time, educators debated whether students could best learn effective thinking through separate courses as an integrated part of every course. There is now widespread agreement that although students do benefit from standalone courses in critical thinking, they must also learn to think within the context of each discipline. The integration of critical thinking into subject areas appears to be the direction in which teaching is heading, especially given that curricula in the schools is already so crowded. As the Voices from the Classroom features suggest, most students, including those who do not speak English, can benefit from instruction that emphasizes critical thinking and problem solving. The writing across the curriculum movement has been the center of curricular interest for a growing number of educators since the 60s. Also called writing to learn or writing to learn in the content areas, this instructional approach emphasizes writing as a tool for students' learning, not only in English classes but also in our other subject areas. How can teachers use the act of writing as the medium through which subject matter learning takes place? Students in social studies classes may be asked to take a written stand on school issues, moral questions, or political problems. Many students may write their own ballads. Students in science classes may work together to predict the future in story form or to write futuristic headlines and news features. Children in math classes can create their own world problems and keep records of what they have learned, their questions, and their observations. Art classes can write scripts for slideshows and cartoon strips or create illustrated guides and storybooks. Teachers at many grade levels and in many subject areas can ask students to keep informal journals or learning logs. In these journals, students record their responses to what they had read and studied and can then interact both with text material and with the students' responses to their queries and remarks. These are just a few examples of the many ways teachers use writing as a thinking tool for students to use and apply their knowledge in the content areas. Up until the time he came to me as a second grader, Roll's content education had been conducted in Spanish. Only in the latter part of first grade did he begin to learn English. My second grade classroom was labeled English as a second language, but I spoke no Spanish. The only Spanish that Raul heard in the classroom was from a 1-hour Spanish aid and from the other children. I wondered how I was going to reach this obviously bright and talented boy. This was soon made clear during one of our first math lessons. Having been trained in cognitively guided instruction, I gave the children a story problem and asked them to solve it with their own intended strategies. Although Raul couldn't at first read the problem, another child translated for him. Raul came alive. He drew pictures and used numbers to model his strategy to the problem. I knew I was taking a risk that day when I asked Raul to share his strategy with the other students. I wonder whether I had made a mistake when he grasped for words to explain. But explain he did. He drew his picture on the board, labeled it with numbers, and wrote a number sentence to match the problem. In short phrases, he shared his thinking sequentially. Raul blossomed after that day. His English began to improve as he continually volunteered to share his thinking in mathematics. In his math journal, Raul wrote, "Math is my favorite because I get to be the teacher and it makes me feel proud." Unfortunately, Raul's excitement has not continued. This year, as a lead teacher on my own campus, I visit Raul's classroom once a week. He is learning math through more conventional methods using the traditional algorithms. It is painful to see him using traditional methods that he really doesn't understand and that take him so much longer than his invented strategies. His teacher says he is becoming unfocused and having discipline problems. Although his English has improved considerably, math is no longer his great equalizer or passion. My only hope is that Raul rediscovers his love and enthusiasm for mathematics. For if he does not, we have failed him. It is now 2013, and I am working with teachers and principals of second language learners. As teachers are becoming more proficient in their own understanding of math content and administrators are becoming instructional leaders, I see many Rauls who are being encouraged to learn math conceptually. Additionally, with the Common Core state standards adoption in Arizona, I am hopeful that our students will find the love of math that Raul had when he was my student. The term differentiated instruction is relatively new on the educational scene, though its practice has been around for a long time. In its simplest form, differentiated instruction tries to respond to student variance rather than adopting a standardized approach to teaching that assumes all learners in a class are essentially alike. The academic diversity of a student in today's classroom is growing, and one instructional approach won't work for all students. As schools try to ensure that all students learn what is expected of them, teachers recognize that they need to customize their instruction techniques to meet individual student needs. That is, teachers are trying to tailor their instruction to provide appropriate challenges for gifted students who lag behind and students who fall in between the two extremes. Differentiated instruction is a teaching philosophy based on the premise that teachers should adapt instruction to student differences in reading readiness, learning preferences, and interests. According to Carol Tomlinson, a national expert on the differential instruction, teachers can differentiate three aspects of curriculum: content, process, and products. Content refers to the concepts, principles, and skills that teachers want students to learn. All students should be given access to the same core content, but teachers can provide different means to give students access to skills and knowledge. Process refers to the activities that help students make sense of and own the knowledge being taught. Teachers can vary the activities to provide some students with access to more complexity and others with more support, depending on their readiness levels, interests, and learning preferences. Product refers to culminating projects that students develop to demonstrate and extend what they have learned. The projects assigned can vary depending on students' interests or learning preferences. For example, some students might prefer to work as members of a group while producing a play about the topic being studied, whereas others might prefer to work alone while writing a term paper. Differentiating content, process, and product for students requires teachers to know their students, their subject, and their materials. There is no formula for differentiation, no single best way to address all possible student differences. Rather, teachers must make all commitment to start with students and to make a match between learner and the material to be learned. The goal, however, is always the same: to maximize the capacities of each student. One popular way of providing differentiation at the early childhood or elementary school level is through the project approach, which entails an in-depth investigation of real-world topics worthy of children's attention and effort. The project approach uses a set of teaching strategies to guide children through their investigation. The project may involve a whole class or a subgroup of students. Phase 1 of the project approach starts with an opening event designed to capture the students' attention. The teacher then gets the children to map out what they already know about the event and generate questions that they would like to investigate during the project. In Phase 2, children participate in some type of field trip to investigate the topic and try to answer their questions. A debriefing takes place after the field trip, and sometimes an outside expert is invited to share his or her knowledge about the topic. In Phase 3, a culminating event takes place to which parents, other classes, and other interested parties may be involved. Children have also have the opportunity to personalize their knowledge through differentiated imaginative activities such as dramatic renditions or story writing. Suppose someone offered you an educational innovation with the following benefits: better teacher-student relationships, improved teacher job satisfaction, extra teaching time, a richer curriculum, increased student attendance, increased student development on social skills, and a sense of community, and easy implementation at very little cost. Sound good? Proponents of an old but increasingly common practice called looping claim these outcomes as being among its benefits. Looping is a simple concept in which teachers are promoted with their students to the next grade level and stay with the group for several years, typically 2 years, but sometimes as long as 5 years. Although not much quantitative research exists on the benefits of looping, qualitative research supports the benefits just mentioned. By keeping the same group of students together with the same teacher, everyone gets to know one another well and feel comfortable in the group. Teachers get to know their students' strengths, weaknesses, and interests. Forging bonds of trust and understanding between teachers and students is at the heart of looping. Teachers who loop have fewer transitions to make at the beginning of the school year and can introduce curriculum topics right away at the start of the second year. They don't have to spend precious instructional time at the beginning of the new school year to establish classroom routines and expectations. Instead, teachers can spend the gained time exploring curriculum topics in greater detail. Administrators argue that looping isn't for everyone, so implementation should be on a voluntary basis. Some administrators urge teaming teachers to implement looping. In that way, students can benefit from different teacher strengths, and if a student has a problem with one particular teacher, another teacher can compensate. The flipped classroom is a model of teaching in which the typical lecture and the homework elements of a course are reversed. Students view short video lectures at home, so in-class time can be spent in discussion, project, and exercises. Teachers either prepare the video lectures themselves or find online material that explains the content and procedures that the teacher wants students to learn. After viewing the video, students come to class ready to talk about the concepts introduced in the lecture, prepared to ask questions to clarify that they didn't understand, or test themselves in applying knowledge. In class, teachers then serve as advisors or coaches, encouraging students in individual inquiry or collaborative effect. In the flipped classroom, teachers give up their traditional roles as sage on the stage in favor of a more collaborative and cooperative role. Flipped classrooms require extra effort on part of the teacher to record the short video lectures in advance. Students who may be used to a passive role as the teacher presents new material in class now find themselves bearing more responsibility for their own learning. The flipped classroom shifts priorities from merely covering the material to working toward mastery of it. Given the highly pluralistic society and many different educational philosophies represented in the United States today, it is little wonder that the questions of how and what schools should teach generate much controversy and debate. In this section, we briefly touch on two of the most highly charged curriculum issues. The question of whether the curriculum should strive to promote American unity or to recognize the diversity of the nation, and the issue of placing students in different tracks of study. American schools have traditionally placed a central role in illustrating the ideas and attitudes that maintain our pluralistic society as one nation. They have helped weave the many ethnic and religious strands together to make seamless national garment. At least that's the theory. Questions are now being raised about whether schools today provide a shared understanding of our culture, history, and tradition. Does the current curriculum of U.S. schools reflect our national diversity to the exclusion of our national unity? Or is the reverse true? Proponents of a multicultural curriculum argue that minority students' representation in U.S. public schools exceeds 40% and is increasing every year, experience a Eurocentric curriculum that gives short shrift to the literary and historical contributions made by people from other parts of the world and to minorities within the United States. As a result, the proponents of multiculturalism argue youngsters of color see the school's curricula as being less relevant to them and certainly not reflective of their own cultures or backgrounds. Some multicultural advocates take the position that the current school curriculum needs to be broadened to better reflect the contributions of people of color. Cultural pluralism as a fact of our society needs to be a fact of our school curriculum, they assert. A more extreme position is taken by those who demand that the new curriculum be oriented to a particular ethnicity. For example, some advocates of an Afrocentric curriculum claim that African American school children can learn effectively only in an environment that recognizes and amplifies their African heritage. The theory is that if students learn of the accomplishments of those who share their ethnic identities, their self-esteem will improve, which will in turn promote learning. When schools emphasize the achievements of African cultures, especially ancient Egyptian culture, and of people of African descent, students will have a greater sense of pride and be more motivated to learn, thus raising their test scores. Although the way they were more popular in the 90s, Afrocentric curricula are still being used in some large city school districts. In contrast, proponents of a core curriculum, that is, a course of study every student would be required to take, argue that ever since the 70s, schools have focused on celebrating national diversity and pluralism, but have failed to help students develop a shared national identity and common cultural framework. As described in Chapter 9, what are the physiological foundations of American education? Some advocates of a core curriculum, such as Mortimer Adler, have promoted the great literacy works that have endured over the years as the basic elements of a core curriculum. E.D. Hirsch Jr. also endorses education based on the great literacy works, but goes beyond them in his push for cultural literacy. Hirsch sees a culturally literate person as someone who is aware of the central ideas, stories, scientific knowledge, events, and personalities of a culture. Cultural literacy is important, says Hirsch, because authors and speakers make allusions and references in their writing and speaking, assuming that the audience understands these references. If a person doesn't understand the references, he or she will miss the point and not understand the message. If an author writes, for example, of the Midas touch, the reader doesn't know the story of King Midas, then the point is lost and the knowledge meaningless. Hirsch does not restrict his idea of a core curriculum to the great works of dead white males, a criticism leveled at many traditional core curricula. Rather, he sees American culture as incorporating the contributions of many ethnicities and subculture. Hirsch believes that privileged youth gain much of their cultural literacy at home. Unfortunately, many poor minority and immigrant children do not receive cultural literacy at home, so it is especially important that they receive it in school. If they do not, Hirsch argues poor children and the increasing numbers of immigrant children will not learn those aspects of our common heritage that are necessary to succeed in American society. Hirsch and his colleagues, through the Core Knowledge Foundation, have developed grade by grade guidelines for a core knowledge sequence for grades K through 8, as well as a series of books entitled What Your First Grader Needs to Know. During the 2012-2013 school year, there were 1,230 schools in 45 states and D.C. using all or part of the core knowledge sequence. In a society as large and pluralistic as the U.S., many philosophies and notions of school purpose have committed supporters. How can the schools incorporate in their curricula such highly divergent ideas of what a school should do? If a certain philosophy is dominant within a given community, the curriculum of that community school is likely to reflect the set of beliefs, and those who don't agree will remain dissatisfied. Some communities are responding to the diverse philosophical conceptions of the curriculum by providing choices about alternative schools, with each a different curricular emphasis. The debate between those who advocate a common curriculum to ensure that all students learn what society has determined is important, and those who favor state, local, and individual choice and what is learned will likely continue indefinitely. The adoption of the CCSS in English language arts and mathematics would seem to indicate the pendulum is swinging towards a common curriculum. The curriculum that a student receives is influenced by many factors, including aspirations for further schooling, academic ability, motivation, and vocational interests. Based on these and other factors, students are often sorted by ability and placed into academic program tracks that determine what courses they take. This process is called tracking. The track in which a student is placed can open or close future academic and vocational options. The three most common tracks are academic, general, traditional subject of English, science, math, are academic, general, and career and technical. Each track has variations in courses required for different standards for student achievement. Within the academic track, further options exist, including advanced placement, international, baccalaureate, and honors courses. During the 70s and 80s, tracking came under attack. Several prominent educational researchers produced studies showing that students placed in the lower track received an inferior curriculum and less stimulating instruction than students in the academic tracks. Studies also showed that poor and minority students were disproportionately placed in the lower tracks, where they had less qualified teachers and less rigorous curricula and poorer instruction than students in the upper tracks. Tracking became a dirty word, and detracking efforts ensued. Other educational studies found conflicting evidence about the detracting movement itself. Although detracting does help the educational performance of low-achieving students, high-achieving students are hurt academically by elimination of tracking. Parents of these high-achieving students often exert considerable pressure to ensure that their children have access to honor and AP classes, resisting efforts to detract schools. Tracking proponents argue that it is easier to teach relatively homogeneous classes and unrealistic to expect everyone to master the same curriculum. They say students feel more comfortable and learn better when their grouped with peers of similar abilities, and they say tracking enables teachers to tailor instruction the needs of respective groups of students. One study of Massachusetts middle schools found that the more top scores in mathematics came from tracked schools than from detracked schools. Furthermore, teachers who teach the high track students often resist efforts to detract because they enjoy the intellectual challenge and prestige that come from teaching these students. The general sense is that tracking benefits high ability students but hurts low ability students, whereas the reverse is true of detracking. Today, the world community is confronted with staggering problems. There are over 6 billion people on our globe, and forecasters project that the world population will reach 10 billion by 2050. Those people will need food, shelter, and an education that will allow them to lead fulfilled lives. The 20th century saw great advances in manufacturing, agriculture, technology, and the growth of information. But these advances did not come without costs. Acid rain, for example, polluted our vegetation, wildlife, and the very bodies of millions of people. Together, the United States and the rest of the world need to stop this systemic despoiling of our planet. Diseases such as AIDS have weakened whole continents. Weaponry such as nuclear devices and improvised explosive devices daily threaten the world's peace and progress. Religious fanaticism, hunger, and poverty have bred a desperate terrorism in many corners of the world. It is no overstatement to say that we are in a race for global survival. Schools and teachers will play a vital role in determining the outcome of this race. In Chapter 2, What is a School and What is it For?, we describe the curriculum as a social bet. The stakes of that bet are high. In fact, the most basic function of all education is to increase the survival chances of the human community. Before anyone can determine whether a particular curriculum is relevant to today's urgent needs, some difficult issues must be addressed. In Chapter 2, What is a School and What is it For?, we discuss the purpose of schools and different models of schooling, particularly the school as a transmitter of culture and the school as an agent of social reconstruction. In Chapter 9, What are the Physiological Foundations of American Education?, we discuss 4 schools of educational philosophy: perennialism, progressivism, essentialism, and romanticism. In judging curriculum, relevance in these matters come into play because the relevance of a curriculum strongly depends on one's basic beliefs about what people need and what is most worth thinking. Before you consider being a relevant curriculum, ultimately depends on your philosophical position. Conflicting trends have emerged in relation to the academic curriculum, each representing a different philosophy. For example, if one considers the school's primary objective to be the intellectual development of students, any curriculum that does not emphasize the mastery of certain subject matter and the training of the mind will be judged as irrelevant or wrong-headed. Conversely, if one believes the school should emphasize the development of the whole child, that is, the entirety of the child's emotional, social, and intellectual growth, a curriculum devoted exclusively to English, history, the science, math, and foreign language will be considered inappropriate for many students and thus inadequate. Those who take the view that education must be equip students with necessary work and survival skills may consider a flexible curriculum that includes career and technical courses to be more relevant. The saber-tooth curriculum uses a humorous approach to demonstrate the conflicts among different educational approaches. In his classic satire on curriculum irrelevance, Harold Benjamin describes how the first school curriculum was developed in the Stone Age. The earliest theorist, according to Benjamin's book, was a man named Newfist, who hit on the idea of deliberate, systematic education. Watching children at play, Newfist wondered how he could get them to do the things that would gain them more and better food, shelter, clothing, and security. He analyzed the activities that adults engaged in to maintain life and came up with 3 subjects for his curriculum: fish grabbing with the bare hands, woolly horse clubbing, and saber-toothed tiger scarring with fire. Although the children trained in these subjects enjoyed obvious material benefits as a result, some conservative members of the tribe resisted the introduction of these new subjects on religious grounds. But in due time, many people began to train their children in Newfist's curriculum, and the tribe grew increasingly prosperous and secure. Then conditions changed. An ice age began, and a glacier crept down over the land. The glacier brought with it dirt and gravel that muddied the creeks, and the waters became so dirty that no one could see the fish well enough to grab them. The melting waters from the approaching ice sheet also made the country wetter, and the little woolly horses migrated to drier land. They were replaced by antelopes, which were so shy and speedy that no one could get close enough to club them. Finally, the new dampness in the air caused the saber-toothed tigers to catch pneumonia and die, and the ferocious glacial bears that came down with the advancing ice sheet were not afraid of fire. The thinkers of the tribe, descendants of New Fist, found a way out of the dilemma. One figured out how to catch fish with a net made from vines. Another invented traps for the antelopes, and a third discovered how to dig pits to catch the bears. Some thoughtful people began to wonder why these new activities couldn't be taught in the schools, but the elders who controlled the schools claimed that the new skills did not qualify as education. They were merely a matter of training. Besides, the curriculum was too full of the standard cultural subjects: fish grabbing, horse clubbing, and tiger scaring, to admit new ones. When some radicals argued that the traditional subjects were foolish, the elders said that they taught fish grabbing not to catch fish, but to develop agility, horse clubbing to develop strength, and tiger scaring to develop courage. The essence of true education is timeless, they announced. It is something that endures through changing conditions, like a solid rock standing squarely and firmly in the middle of a raging torrent. You must know that there are some internal verities, and the saber-tooth curriculum is one of them. The saber-tooth curriculum was written in 1939, but its continuing applicability seems to be one of the internal verities. End of chapter 5.